Good morning and welcome to Word of Faith Responds. It's so good to be with you this morning, and we have been sharing with you the many wonderful things that Jesus has done in our lives. We've had many members of the Word of Faith Fellowship coming on this program and sharing with you of all their struggles in life and the different backgrounds they came from, and yet through it all, Jesus brought them to Him, to know Him, and to just walk with Him every single day in a wonderful relationship. And we're just so grateful for what God has done in our lives that we have come on this program to just share with you how wonderful it is to walk with Jesus Christ. And today I have some very special guests with me. I have Josh and Andrea Farmer. They're actually my law partners. We all practice together in Rutherfordton at Farmer Morris Law. We have several other attorneys that have actually been on the program as well. And it's really an honor for me to have them with me today. They are very special to me. We're really much more than law partners. We're really family. I look at them as my brother and sister. We have such a wonderful time together. You know, it's just wonderful when you actually are practicing law or working with people who's really like your family. I couldn't trade it for anything else, and they're really just very dear people to me. And so they're here today, and they want to share with you the wonderful things that Jesus has done in their lives. They've been at the Word of Faith for many years. Actually, both of them graduated from the Word of Faith Christian School, and it's really been one miracle after the other that they have seen in their lives. We went to law school together at Chapel Hill, and we're at the same house together, and actually that was a special time as well. As difficult sometimes as law school could be, I know that with them there, it made it easier for me, definitely, especially Josh and Andrea could help me with things, and so they're just a real special blessing. So we're going to actually start with Josh. So Josh, go ahead.
Good morning, Mark. Thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity, Mark and Jim, to be here with you. Good morning, everyone in Rutherford County. I just really appreciate the opportunity to share with you and open my heart a little bit about my life and what Jesus has done in my life. I've thoroughly enjoyed hearing Mark hosting this program over the last 6 months, and I've been amazed. There's many times I've learned things about folks that I've known, but I didn't learn some of their background until I've heard it on your show. So, you know, when I was praying last night, and I was asking God, what would you want me to share? And I really feel like the part that I'm supposed to share about my life is very much about the keeping power of God, His protection that has been on my life in many aspects ever since I was a child, because there were several different times that the devil wanted to kill me as a child, even before I was born, when I was born, after I was born. And through really, God has saved my life in several different circumstances, and I am here by His grace and mercy. And that it's amazing as I think back upon it. So starting back before I was born, my parents were they lived in Hendersonville. They got married in 1972, and they had always grown up and were in church. They were routinely attending church, but they didn't know Jesus the way they know Jesus now. But there was a place in both of their hearts where God began to draw them. My father was a contractor. My mother was a school teacher. Is still a school teacher. So when she was expecting me in early 1977, she was a home economics teacher at Rugby High School in the sort of toward the Mills River area on the other side of Henderson County, and she was teaching 7th and 8th and 9th graders home economics. So she came back into her class one day after visiting the lunchroom, and there was a home economics lab that they were in, and she had a small glass of sweet tea with her, and she had a group of students there, and she said, I guess now, to move ahead, it's toward the end of the period, the students are waiting on the bell to ring, and she takes a sip of this sweet tea that she'd brought out of the lunchroom, and she said, it just burned. And it burned all the way down. And just to step prior to that, this was a new school. my mother had made the acquaintance and friendship with a couple of other teachers there, and one teacher in particular had come to my mother and said, I want to start praying. I want to start praying before class. You know, we've got some issues here at our school. I want to pray. I want to pray for God's will for what's going on in our school. So after this had happened, when my mother took this drink, she immediately went to this particular lady and said, please pray for me. I don't know what just happened, but I'm concerned that something very serious happened. I took a drink of something and something is really wrong. And so she was, at that point, she was expecting me. She was about 2 months along, and the lady prayed. And my mother says, she said, I can't explain what happened other than obviously we know now what happened. I mean, it was the healing power of God. But she said, I could just feel a tangible peace on the inside of me as my friend and I prayed. And so later, she went back to class. At that point, after, you know, just feeling a peace on the inside, she went back to class. She called my dad at the end of the school day. My dad said, go see your family doctor. So she went to see her family doctor, a fellow named Dr. Strickland, and he wanted to pass it off. He said, Diane, if you're in a food lab, my mother's name's Diane, father's name's Ray. If you're in a food lab, I'm sure it's just some sort of spice. You don't need to worry about it. Here, let me just throw that out, because she had kept the sample of the drink. And she said, no, I don't feel like I'm supposed to do this. Went further, went home, talked to my father, and he took it to law enforcement at that point and explained what happened. So they sent that sweet tea to the state lab and discovered that it had cyanide in it. And there was enough cyanide in that remaining glass of tea, maybe about a third or a half of a cup, to kill 15 people, they said. So the law enforcement investigated at that point. At some point, a student steps forward and admits that she was trying to impress her friends. Her father was a gunsmith, and cyanide is used in some applications for cleaning metals and cleaning guns. And she put some of her father's chemicals that included cyanide in my mother's sweet tea. And so many times, a lot of people in the community knew about it, and they would come to my mother, are you going to be okay? Are you going to be okay? Is your baby going to be okay? And my mother had a peace in her heart, and she told everyone, I'm fine, my baby's going to be fine. And she was never affected again by that. And I was never, to our knowledge, affected by that. I mean, that really shows me the miraculous and merciful hand of God on her life.
Definitely.
You know, she said she just took a very small sip. If she'd taken a large sip of it,
right,
that probably would have killed her there. Yeah. So then further, when I was born, there was an incident where there was something wrong with me, and in the course of being born, the doctors cracked my skull. So here, basically, I've got a fracture on the right side of my skull. And the doctors didn't fully know that at the time, but I was very much in distress. We were at the hospital in Fletcher, which is now Park Ridge. They sent me on to Asheville in the neonatal intensive care unit, left my mother in the Fletcher Hospital. So my dad's with me in Asheville. Obviously, I don't know this. This is what's being told to me later. And a neurosurgeon visits me and examines me in the neonatal intensive care unit, comes back and tells my father and says, well, he was very brusque and matter of fact and to the point. He said, well, I've got some bad news. Your son he's had a fracture in his skull. It has come into the orbit of his right eye, so he's going to have eye problems. But worse than that, he's going to be retarded. He's really never going to amount to anything. He's got swelling on the brain, and they were going to have to do surgery. So the doctors later, within a few weeks, put a shunt in the back of my brain to drain off spinal fluid. and then later that had to be revised. There's a tube that drains into my abdominal cavity, and so that had to be fixed several months later. I did have some difficulties with my eye. I can't look up or down with my right eye, and so I've had to have some subsequent surgeries from that. I had a surgery when I was 5 years old in Miami. My parents led God led my parents to some doctors in Miami who did some surgery on my eye to improve the way they worked together. But what I really see in all of this, first of all, again, the merciful hand of God of, thankfully, what that doctor predicted didn't come true, didn't bear out. But those two incidents are really what really began to impel my parents to seek God in a new way. I mean, sure, they went to church, they would have called themselves a Christian, but in both of those incidents, that caused them to realize we need to know Jesus for ourselves. We need more of a relationship with Jesus. And so they reached out, and they were searching for a new church family at the time, and through several connections in Tulsa, Oklahoma, they met Sam and Jane Whaley at the time. And then Sam and Jane came back to Rutherford County in 1985, in July of 1985, and a fellow named Ken Green told my parents, you need to go down, they lived in Hendersonville at the time, you need to go down to Rutherford. Sam and Jane Whaley have come back, and they've taken over the pastorship of the Word of Faith. They had been there before. Mm-hmm. And so we started coming to the Word of Faith in December of 1985. I would have been 8 years old, and that was just a few months after Sam and Jane came back into the county. And so one thing I can say, I've been a member of the church for nearly 33 years now. And it amazes me to hear some of these crazy allegations that people bring, because that is not the church I go to. And I've been there since 9 to the beginning. Mm-hmm. But, another part of this that I wanted to share was, I grew up then after moving down here. We moved down in 1986, attending the church. Attended the church's school that we started in 1989. So I attended that from the 7th grade to the 12th grade. But one thing that I've learned in my life, and you got to have a personal relationship with Jesus for yourself. So I can't make it to heaven. You can't make it to heaven. None of us can on the coattails of our pastor or our parents or our grandmother, or maybe that aunt that knows Jesus. I mean, we've got to know Jesus for ourselves. And so there was a period of my life when I was a youth. I grew up in the church, went to church every day. Certainly would have said I'm a Christian, but there are parts that my heart began to grow cold in certain things, or my heart began to be pulled away. You pulled after the world's got it has its enticements and allures. And the devil wants to pull your heart away. And so, there came a time in my life where I truly gave my heart to Jesus. And I know that there was a change, because I came to a point where I said, Jesus, I don't, whatever you want for my life, that's what I want. And regardless of what that is, regardless of the consequences, whatever you want for my life. And at the point that I gave up my own wishes and desires, and that's when I really felt the hand of God, and I felt the presence of God, and I felt the Holy Spirit in my heart, and I know there was a change. The one verse I wanted to share is in John 10, verse 27, and Jesus is talking and he's teaching, and it says, the sheep that are my own hear and are listening to my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. Well, one thing that Sam and Jane have always taught in our church is God's got a plan for your life, and the devil's got a plan for your life. There is no third way. You're in the will of God. You're either in the will of God or you're in the will of the devil. And out of part of that, they have also, they teach us, and what we learn from the Bible is you've got to have that daily relationship with Jesus. Being a Christian isn't showing up in church on Sunday morning and forgetting about God the rest of the week. It's walking with Jesus step by step, moment by moment. It's hearing his voice. It's what that verse just said, my sheep hear and know my voice. And really, when my heart changed, it became clear to me, if I'm not hearing the voice of God, if I'm not listening, if I'm not obeying, then there'll be another voice there, and it's going to be the voice of the devil. And if you're not walking with Jesus, you won't know the difference between the Spirit of God on the inside of you prompting you and those temptations of the devil. And that's really when I began to see a change in my life, is when I purposed that, Jesus, I want you, I want nothing but you, and that's what's fulfilling. And that I've never felt more peace, and I've never felt more fulfilled in my life until I came to that realization. But, the other thing I wanted to mention with regard to Sam and Jane Whaley in the church, and I've heard my dad say it many times over many years, he says, all Sam and Jane Whaley want people to do is they want people to live godly and holy lives. They're not gaining anything out of this. They're following the voice of God. They're helping people, but they're not in it for their gain. Yeah, I represent the church. I've seen the books. Sam and Jane Whaley aren't getting rich out of this. This has nothing to do with money. This has to do with the call of God on their lives, as God has shown them to help people. And they have helped people regardless of their station in life or what they have. My parents, we came down here from Hendersonville when I was young. We didn't have any money. And this church family did nothing but open their arms to my family. And they've become my family. And that's just like Mark's become my family.
That's right.
So I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you. Later, God gives me a wife, a very sweet, precious wife that we've now been married 20 years.
It's 20 years.
And God brought her here from Tulsa, Oklahoma. And I'm very grateful for that. And she wants to share some as well.
Thank you. And thank you very much, Rutherford County, for listening. And thank you, Jim, for having us this morning. Just wanted to share a little about my life. I am from Tulsa, Oklahoma. I was born and raised there. I ended up moving here when I was about 17 years old. But even the circumstances around my birth were miraculous. My parents got married, and pretty much right away they wanted to start a family. But my mom had some problems, and they were told that they would never have children. They went to doctor after doctor. They had procedure after procedure, and eventually they were told it was not possible. It was not physically possible for them to have children. So they proceeded to adopt 2 children, my sister and my brother. And after, thinking that their family was complete, 17 years later, I show up, so to speak. They end up expecting and having me. And so my sister's actually 14 years older than I am, just to give you an idea of how much age difference there is there. But really, the thing that always spoke to me when my parents would tell me that story is I could really see how my mom was like Hannah in the Bible, where she cried out to God to have a baby, to have a child, and God gave her Samuel, and God heard her cry and answered her prayer. And I know my mom was very, very much like that. My mom, even raising me, she always raised me in the things of God. Yes, we went to church, but even outside of our own church, we were always going to prayer meetings or having prayer meetings in our home, or there was always a place in her heart where she really was seeking God and seeking God's will for her life and for my life too. She always had me in the middle of everything. I can remember being a young girl going to Friday night we called them Friday Night Holy Ghost meetings in Tulsa that actually Sam and Jane led, and being a little girl there, and we never missed one, and dancing across the front and getting up and singing in front of everybody just as a young child. I always had a place in my heart for God. But to kind of go back a little bit, because when my parents found out that they were expecting me, the house they lived in was not big enough for another child. So they ended up moving across town to a completely different area of Tulsa. And about the time that they moved into this new neighborhood, Sam and Jane also moved into this neighborhood. Sam and Jane Whaley. Sam was there teaching in a Bible school at that time. And they ended up living 2 houses down from us. And so we were neighbors. They became very, very close friends. Their daughter Robin used to babysit me. And really, it was just a divine connection. I mean, that's what I've seen looking back through my entire life is the hand of God in my life. God gives you everything you need in life. And really, it was a divine connection there. And my mom actually started traveling with Sam and Jane in the ministry, even to other countries. And God really just knit our hearts together way back then. And then when I was a young child, they moved back here to Rutherford County. And every time they had a seminar or a special meeting here, we would always come to visit. We would drive that road many, many days between here and Oklahoma, and we would always come to visit. My mom and I would, and my dad came some too. My sister ended up moving here and going to the Bible school here and kind of getting established here. And again, my mom and I would come frequently and visit. And really, growing up, I always knew that I was going to move here. It was just a matter of when. I always knew that I would. When I in school in Tulsa, I grew up and I went to a private Christian school, went there almost my entire life. But once I got to high school, the pulls of the world and the things of this world, really started becoming more real to me. And as Josh mentioned, how God has a plan for your life and the devil always has a plan. Well, I always made good grades in school. I was always at the top of my class, and I started really the devil's plan started being laid out for me before I even realized it. And the school that I went to had very close ties with Oral Roberts University, and I was getting set up even to have a scholarship to go there, and other things were sort of coming in line in my life. But one day I woke up and really God came to me, and I realized the devil's plan was being set for my life, and I saw my end, so to speak, and I saw that it wasn't what I wanted. And God really, really changed my heart there. And as Josh talked about a place of surrender that he saw come in his life, the same thing happened to me. That I really wanted to know Jesus for myself, that it wasn't just because of my circumstances that I was in church, or because of my circumstances that I was, quote, said I was a Christian, but really I came to know Jesus for myself. I ended up moving here, and I finished out my high school here at Word of Faith Christian School. And then I knew it was God's will for me to go to college, and so I started looking. And I graduated from the Christian school in 96. Actually, Josh graduated a year before I did in 95. But I started looking into what I wanted to do in terms of college, and at the same time, Josh was looking into that, and we ended up going to college together and becoming very close friends. We went to ICC for a couple of years, and then we were going to transfer into Wofford. And actually, we became best friends, and we got married between our sophomore and junior year of college. And so by the time we went to Wofford, we were married. We were known as the married couple on campus because that was quite unusual. And really, throughout our college career, and even since then, people always look at us and say, how can you go to school with your husband? How can you go to law school with your husband? How can you work all the time with your husband? Don't you all, fight or get upset? And it's never been that way. I have always viewed it as we're a team. We work together. We work together very well. Things I miss, he's there to help me. Things he misses, I'm there to help him. And that's how it always was, even in law school and ever since. We work very, very well together, and I'm very grateful and very blessed to have him by my side. But, really my testimony is one of just the hand of God in my life. All throughout, I can see God's plan for me. I can see how he's orchestrated different divine connections in my life. And and I'm grateful for that, and I'm grateful for the plan of God. And one thing I wanted to share, it was a prophecy that came to Josh and I when we got married out of Jeremiah 1. And it says, I can just quote it to you, but it says, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew and approved of you as my chosen instrument." And really, I've seen that in our life. I've seen how God chose us and how God kept us, even what He shared and other situations we've had in our life. He one time got bit by a copperhead, and his life was threatened there. But God chose us, all of us, before the foundation of the world. He has a plan for us. He has a call for us. And also part of that prophecy that God gave to us, God told us, like Moses, where he could have chosen the wealth and the fame of Egypt and the things that the world had to offer him in Pharaoh's kingdom, but instead of the fleeting enjoyment of a sinful life, he chose the contempt and shame born for Christ as greater wealth. And really, that's what Josh and I have chosen in our lives. And our hearts are set, our face is set. That's what we want, only is to serve Jesus. And, the provision of God has been there for us every step. And really, we're so happy. I wouldn't trade the joy or the peace that we have. And God gave us a son. He's now 11. His name is Thomas. And he's really been a joy in our lives. And I really just see, without Jesus, you're not fulfilled. Your life is not fulfilled. Many, many people out there have money. Many, many people out there have fame. But they're lost. And they don't have happiness and they don't have peace. And I wouldn't trade what God's given me for anything in this world.
And thank you so much, Josh and Andrea. And definitely both of your lives show you both shine Jesus. I'm with you every day. We used to live together in Chapel Hill every day. And I can attest that Jesus Christ has really touched both your hearts. And it's just such a privilege for me to be with you. Josh, I was thinking about you sharing, and I actually didn't know all the details of what you just shared about what happened how much the devil tried to destroy your life.
That's right.
The doctors are saying to your parents that you're going to be retarded. And what the listeners you don't know, which I do know, is Josh actually graduated from Wofford College, the top of his class, the highest GPA. Both of you went on to law school and had this Chancellor Scholarship, which is the full scholarship, paying for everything. You graduated with honors from law school, and here it is, so opposite of what the assignment of the devil was at your life, to make you retarded, and here you are graduating the top of your class everywhere because Jesus Christ had a plan for you, just
That's
like
right.
you shared, Andrea.
That's
He
right.
knew you before you were even in your mother's womb. He approved of you. He had your life planned out for you, and he had great things for you, and both of you decided to step in the plan that God had for you. What a wonderful testimony that you have shared. And, I just want to encourage everyone. It was so important what was shared today about relationship with Jesus Christ. And we've shared with you on this program so many times, but as you just heard today, you can't rely on anybody else. It's got to be a personal relationship between you and Jesus Christ. And that's what God wants for all of us. That's what he has for all of us, because he loves us so much that he wants to know us personally. He wants us to know him personally. And that's what you heard today from Josh and Andrea, where they have learned to know Jesus Christ personally. And I just encourage everyone, that is the plan that God has for all of us before we were ever born. So we thank you again for listening. We are here Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, 8:30 to 9 a.m. We hope you have a great day.